It's the hardest because late last night, early this morning, we lost someone very special who was much too young to go.
There are stories in the entertainment world that begin with fame, fortune, and the glamour of the stage. But then there are stories, rare ones, that begin with something far more powerful: friendship. And tonight, you're about to witness the journey of a man whose name you may have heard countless times on a late-night show, yet whose life was a universe of passion, loyalty, and quiet brilliance. This is the story of Cleto Escobedo III, the saxophonist whose sound defined a generation of late-night television, the childhood friend who walked beside Jimmy Kimmel long before the cameras ever rolled, and the musician whose warmth touched thousands of hearts long before anyone knew his name. His life was not built on controversy, scandals, or headlines, because sometimes the greatest stories belong to the quiet giants who changed the world simply by showing up with heart, humor, and unconditional loyalty. Cleto's journey begins in Las Vegas, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood, in a tight-knit community of families who knew each other by name and kids who lived their days on bicycles, in backyard games, and in the shared dreams of what adulthood might one day bring. In those dusty streets, a young Jimmy Kimmel found his closest friend in Cleto Escobedo III, and nobody back then, not Jimmy, not Cleto, not their parents, knew that these two kids would one day walk onto one of America's biggest late-night stages together. Cleto grew up surrounded by music. His father, Cleto Escobedo Sr., was a musician himself, and for young Cleto, music was more than a hobby. It was a language he learned before adulthood. He practiced the saxophone not because someone forced him to, but because it felt like the only thing in the world that made complete sense, while other kids were figuring out who they wanted to be. Cleto was already building his identity through the warm brass of his sax, exploring sounds that eventually became his signature. What made Cleto special wasn't just the fact that he could play, it was the way he played. Even as a teenager, he had a unique energy, a spark that people couldn't help but notice. He wasn't loud, he wasn't boastful, but he carried that quiet confidence that only comes from doing something out of love. His childhood was ordinary in many ways, but the extraordinary was always growing inside him, waiting for the world to hear it. Meanwhile, his friendship with Jimmy was evolving into something like brotherhood. They bonded over jokes, mischief, and dreams far bigger than their small neighborhood. They may not have known it then, but these two boys were shaping each other's futures. Jimmy, the natural entertainer, and Cleto, the natural artist, two personalities that seemed different but blended perfectly. And their bond would become the heartbeat of a show millions tuned into every night. Through high school and into adulthood, the world began to notice Cleto's musical gifts. His saxophone wasn't just skillful, it was expressive, soulful, and instantly recognizable. He began performing with a number of artists, eventually touring with the likes of Paula Abdul and Mark Anthony. To many musicians, this would have been the apex of their careers. But for Cleto, even with all this success, there was still something missing, something he couldn't quite name, something waiting for him in the future that only fate could arrange. All this time, his friendship with Jimmy stayed intact. Life took them down different paths, but like all real friendships, they always found their way back to each other. Jimmy was crafting his own identity in the entertainment world, navigating the highs and lows that come with chasing a dream. And Cleto, though living the life of a touring musician, still carried with him the simplicity and warmth of the boy who grew up in Las Vegas. Years passed, careers shifted, opportunities came and went. But then, everything changed in 2003 when ABC greenlit a new late-night show. Jimmy Kimmel lived, and that's when Cleto's life as well as Jimmy's transformed forever. Asterisk. When Jimmy Kimmel was preparing to launch his late-night show, he knew that the heart of the show had to be authentic. He didn't want an orchestra of strangers. He didn't want a bandleader chosen by producers. He wanted someone he trusted, someone who wasn't just talented, but a part of his life story. And it was only natural that his first call was to Cleto Escobedo III. For Cleto, the idea of joining the show wasn't just another job offer. It was a full-circle moment. It meant playing music every night on national television. But more importantly, it meant standing beside his best friend on one of the biggest nights of their lives. And so, when Jimmy asked him to lead the house band, Cleto said yes, not because it was the safest choice, but because it felt like destiny. They created something special. Cleto and the Cletons, the house band of Jimmy Kimmel Live, Cleto became the face, the sound, and the soul of the music that opened every episode. Every night, millions of viewers heard the energetic brass of his saxophone. But what many didn't know was that behind that music was a story of lifelong loyalty of to kids who had once sat on the edges of their beds imagining futures neither of them could predict. Having his father join the band added an even deeper layer to the story. Cleto Sr. brought experience, tradition, and a musical legacy that connected generations. Their relationship on stage was not just professional, it was a reflection of a lifetime of mentorship and love between a father and son. Their presence gave the show an unmistakable warmth, something you couldn't fake even if you tried. Cleto never tried to be the star of the show, yet he became a star anyway. His quiet humor, gentle smile, and easygoing personality became a comforting presence to viewers. He didn't seek attention. Attention simply found him. His personality was the opposite of chaotic celebrity culture. While others chased fame, Cleto just wanted to play music and enjoy the people around him. Behind the scenes, he was known for making everyone from celebrities to crew members feel welcome. He'd crack jokes, share stories, and lift the energy of the room without ever making himself the center of it. He was the type of person whose presence alone changed the atmosphere. People trusted him, they respected him, and they loved him. As the years went by, Jimmy and Cleto built a television legacy that lasted more than 2 decades. Their chemistry was pure, honest, and impossible to replicate. Viewers saw something real, something rare, a friendship that had survived childhood, adulthood, and the unpredictable waves of show business. Their bond wasn't scripted, it was lived. While the world saw the polished performances and nightly laughter, few saw the years of rehearsing, the shared meals backstage, the late-night talks, and the sense of family that grew among the band. Cleto wasn't just a musician, he was the anchor, the calm in the storm, the person you could rely on, no matter how tough the industry became. But even behind that calm presence, life was not without its struggles. Cleto's health, something he rarely discussed publicly, began to change in ways that would eventually shape the last chapter of his life. But being who he was, a man who never wanted to trouble others, he kept most of his battles private, choosing instead to focus on the music and the people he loved. The relationship between Jimmy Kimmel and Cleto Escobedo III is one of the rarest and most heartwarming friendships in the entertainment industry. A bond that began in childhood, survived adulthood, flourished under the pressure of show business, and ultimately became one of the emotional anchors of Jimmy Kimmel Live, long before audiences even realized it. Their connection was not built on fame or opportunity, but on the simple, sincere beginnings of 2 boys growing up in Las Vegas, discovering the world around them, and unknowingly shaping each other's futures. Jimmy and Cleto first met when they were around 9 years old. Living in the same neighborhood with families who were close-knit and culturally connected, in those early years, there was nothing glamorous about their world. They were just 2 kids who rode bikes, played games, made jokes, and dreamed in the way only children can. Yet even then, their personalities blended in a way that felt effortless. Jimmy, always the comedian, and Cleto, the calm, musically gifted friend, formed a natural balance that would become a key part of their relationship for the rest of their lives. What made their friendship special was its longevity. Many childhood friendships fade with time, distance, and life changes. But Jimmy and Cleto's bond survived every phase: teenage struggles, early careers, failures, successes, and personal obstacles. Even when their paths diverged, the connection remained intact. Cleto entered the world of professional music, playing saxophone with passion that seemed almost innate, performing with well-known artists, and building a reputation among musicians. Meanwhile, Jimmy pursued entertainment, first in radio and later on television. Though both were navigating different industries, they never disconnected from each other's lives. Their childhood friendship became the foundation for an extraordinary professional relationship years later. In 2003, when ABC announced Jimmy Kimmel Live, Jimmy had the chance to assemble the show from scratch, including the house band. He could have chosen any established musician, someone with widespread fame or industry influence. But Jimmy wanted authenticity, something real, something connected directly to who he was. The first person he thought of was Cleto. For Cleto, being called to lead the band wasn't just a job, it was a deeply personal moment. He wasn't simply being hired, he was being invited into a lifelong friend's dream. Accepting the role meant stepping into a future they had never imagined as children. It meant the two boys from Las Vegas were about to walk into national television together, bringing their decades-long bond with them. And so Cleto became the bandleader for Cleto and the Cletons, a title that blended his name with the cultural humor and friendship that defined the show. On the show, Cleto's presence was subtle but essential. He wasn't loud, flashy, or instead, he brought warmth, calmness, and musical brilliance that audiences came to love. His easygoing personality perfectly complemented Jimmy's high-energy comedy. The chemistry between them wasn't scripted. It was something that only years of shared history could create. Their on-screen interactions often felt like glimpses into a lifelong friendship, full of inside jokes, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Jimmy frequently referenced Cleto in monologues, bits, and conversations with guests. But behind the humor, there was real loyalty. Jimmy wanted his best friend by his side, not because it made for great television, but because it made the journey meaningful. Cleto, in turn, offered a grounding presence, someone who kept the environment positive and comfortable even during stressful production days. Their connection extended beyond the studio. They had known each other's families for decades, celebrated milestones together, supported one another through challenges, and maintained a bond that wasn't dependent on fame. When Cleto's father, Cleto Sr., joined the house band as well, it deepened the sense of family that had already existed behind the scenes. Very few shows in the entertainment world had such an authentic, multi-generational connection embedded within them. What made their relationship truly remarkable was the way it held steady through difficulties, especially Cleto's health struggles. As his medical issues grew more serious, Jimmy remained by his side with unwavering support. But out of respect for Cleto's privacy, he never turned his friend's struggles into public drama. Their friendship was built on trust, and that trust never broke. Even during the hardest moments, when Cleto passed away in 2025 due to complications related to a liver transplant, Jimmy's emotional tribute on the show revealed to the world just how deep their connection ran. His voice trembled, his eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment, the usually comedic tone of late-night television dissolved into raw honesty. Jimmy didn't speak as a host. He spoke as a man grieving the loss of someone who had been a brother to him. For over 50 years, his words showed the world that Cleto wasn't just a bandleader, he was family. He was the friend Jimmy grew up with, the person who had been with him through every major chapter of his life, the quiet presence who stood just a few feet away every night as millions watched the show. It was a reminder that behind every moment of laughter on screen, there was a bond decades deep. Even after Cleto's passing, his influence remains a permanent part of Jimmy Kimmel Live and of Jimmy's life. Their friendship stands as proof that success means little without the people who helped shape the journey. Cleto wasn't famous because he appeared on TV. He was loved because he was genuine, loyal, humble, and constant. And Jimmy's devotion to honoring his legacy shows the depth of their shared history. The story is one of the strongest examples of enduring friendship in the entertainment industry, friendship built before fame, surviving fame, and lasting beyond it. It reminds us that some relationships, no matter where life takes us, remain unbreakable. And for Jimmy Kimmel, Cleto Escobedo III will forever be more than a colleague. He will always be the childhood friend who stood beside him through laughter, music, and the unforgettable journey of a lifetime. In the world of show business, where personalities shift and careers change overnight, Cleto remained a constant. Night after night, he took his place on the stage, saxophone in hand, performing with the same passion he had carried since childhood. But privately, he was facing a growing challenge. His health began to decline, and eventually the need for a liver transplant became inevitable. This wasn't an easy chapter. Transplants are complicated, risky, and emotionally draining. Yet through it all, Cleto chose dignity, humor, and optimism. He never wanted others to feel worried because of him. He continued performing whenever he could, pushing through the discomfort with the determination of someone who simply loved what he did. And even when he wasn't on stage, the show always felt like it carried pieces of him, his music, his energy, his history. Jimmy Kimmel, who had known Cleto longer than almost anyone, was deeply aware of the battle his friend was fighting. But like Cleto, he maintained privacy, allowing his friend's dignity to come before public curiosity. It wasn't drama. It wasn't publicity. It was real friendship. And real friendship respects silence as much as it celebrates moments of joy. Cleto underwent surgery, and for a time, there was hope that he would recover, return to the stage, and continue the musical life that meant everything to him. But complications arose, as they sometimes do with such difficult procedures. And on November 11, 2025, the news broke that Cleto Escobedo III had passed away at the age of 59. The world was shocked. Fans mourned. Musicians paid tribute. And Jimmy Kimmel, who had laughed, worked, and lived alongside Cleto for decades, delivered one of the most emotional tributes in late-night history. His voice shook, his eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, the entertainment world stood still as a man said goodbye not to a coworker, but to a brother. The grief was shared by millions, because even if you didn't know Cleto personally, you felt like you did. You saw the warmth in his smile. You heard the gentleness in his voice. You felt the sincerity behind his music, and you sensed the kind of soul he had, the kind we don't see often in the whirlwind of celebrity culture. In that moment, viewers around the world realized something important. Cleto wasn't famous because he was on TV. He was famous because he was genuine, because he brought heart into a world that can sometimes forget what heart looks like, and because he showed us that greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through a saxophone, through a smile, through decades of loyalty, after his passing. People began sharing stories, beautiful stories of small acts of kindness Cleto had done behind the scenes, stories of encouragement, humor, generosity, and support. Crew members talked about how he made their stressful days easier. Musicians spoke about how he inspired them. Friends described him as someone who loved deeply and quietly. And Jimmy Kimmel reminded the world that Cleto was not just part of the show, he was part of his life. Cleto's legacy lives not only in the thousands of live performances he gave, but in the relationships he built, the friendship he honored, and the gentle presence he brought into every room. His story teaches us that success is not measured by headlines or controversies, but by the imprint we leave on the people around us. His life was a celebration of authenticity. He didn't try to be something he wasn't. He didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't inflate his ego for fame. Instead, he chose music, loyalty, and love. He chose to remain the same boy from Las Vegas, who found joy in laughter and rhythm and lifelong friendship. And that is why his story matters. Cleto Escobedo III reminds us that the world is shaped not only by the loud, the flashy, or the controversial, but by people whose goodness shines quietly. His life was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones built on kindness, loyalty, and dedication. His saxophone may have gone silent, but his music never will. His presence may have left the stage, but his impact continues to echo. And his friendship with Jimmy Kimmel remains one of the most genuine partnerships television has ever seen. This was not the story of a scandal. This was not the story of controversy. This was the story of a man who lived with heart. A man whose talent never overshadowed his humility. A man who made millions of people smile without ever trying to be in the spotlight. A man who showed the world what true loyalty looks like. Cleto Escobedo III's life teaches us that the most extraordinary stories often come from the most ordinary beginnings, childhood friendships, family music lessons, and dreams rooted in sincerity. And though he left the world too soon, his legacy remains a testament to the fact that greatness doesn't need noise, it simply needs truth. So tonight, as we remember Cleto, we don't just remember the musician, we remember the friend, the son, the laughter, the warmth, the rhythm that carried through every stage he ever touched. And as long as the music he created continues to play, he will continue to live not just in recordings, not just in memories, but in the timeless sound of a soul whose song never truly ends.